Thanks for checking out this highlight from the Casually Hardcore podcast. If you want to check out the full podcast after the show, please be sure to hit the top link in the description. But now, let's do it. For anybody who's just checking this out, whether you're watching it as a part of the highlight itself or if you're watching us live, just note, I'm going to put a light spoiler warning in this case. That does not mean we will talk about spoilers, but I don't want to limit Ryan to his thoughts, especially as we talk about the expectations for Endwalker. I'm very excited about that expansion. So just note, if you guys want to come check this out after the fact, light spoiler warning right now here at the start of this third topic for the podcast itself. Now, you said, Ryan, you tweeted this out, Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers 5.3 presents a conclusion so strong that it could not only have been the conclusion to Final Fantasy XIV, it could have been the conclusion to the entire Final Fantasy franchise and felt satisfying. Truly, the best writing the series has seen in ages. I have to say from this tweet, you are clearly a fan. This is clearly restored, like I would say, almost in your like. Has this restored your faith in the series as a whole?
Yeah. You definitely don't write something like that and then be like 7 out of 10. It restored my faith in Final Fantasy as a whole, man. I was sort of like, I was on at the point where I sort of was like, is Final Fantasy even for me anymore? And it was really at that point too, post remake, where again, there was sort of a narrative diversion, let's just say, with remake, and a lot of people were very big fans of it. I think the majority of people were, and I was not. So I was almost like, man, is this Final Fantasy just not for me anymore? And then when I came back to Final Fantasy XIV, hitting that Shadowbringers content especially, I was just like, oh no, Final Fantasy is still for me. This is still for me. This is so yeah, man, strong feelings. And now going into Endwalker and seeing how they can possibly surpass what they did in 5.0, and I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think they have a setup that allows them to potentially do it.
We could have a great game and it not be as good as Shadowbringers.
That's true.
It does not have to be as good as 5.0 to be a good experience.
But you know what, though? And I imagine that's what's terrifying for the team. Because they can
Yoshi told them that their bonuses would not be based on Metacritic scores. Now, ironically, they'd of course got like the highest Metacritic scores that they've ever gotten. But that's what set them free. Yoshi P said, let's just make the game we want to make. And I think the blueprint is there for that, right? The things that they revealed in the FanFest showcase where he talked about, like, they're making changes that are not popular. They spent, 5 or 10 minutes explaining what a stat squish was just to make sure we're on the same page. Mm-hmm. Because, so they're taking steps to make the structural changes necessary to make the gameplay experience that they wanted. So, I think there's a pretty high likelihood they made the game they want to make. It's just whether or not it's the game we want to follow Shadowbringers.
Yeah, and that's really good. I don't really believe that developers should have Metacritic bonuses. I understand why they do, but I think that's just too much pressure on the team. And
it's easy is what it is. Like what Yoshi P did was he set him free, but they're like you're taking a risk, right? When it's like, hey, I can. If you do this and we can get this, you start playing. It's almost the algorithmic game. You almost start playing to a ever-setting change of rules, and I think essentially what that does is it messes with your psyche. Like, oh, I really want to explore this, but if you start sitting here trying to create art and saying, how will somebody see this art and take it, and oh, what if they don't like it? And so then you hold back. You don't say, hey, here it is, right? So at the end of the day, I think Shadowbringers benefited from that freedom of just make the game you want to make, and your financial life isn't going to be based off of whether somebody on YouTube or Twitter or Twitch likes it or not. And I think that ultimately is a very strong aspect and a very freeing aspect to it. But it's a risk because like if you're sitting here like, oh, okay, if everybody's kind of been built into this mindset. Chris, you look like you got a thought. Go ahead.
Based on your tweet, there's a real risk there in feeling like 5.3 wrapped everything up, right? And now they're turning around and they're opening it back up. What what do you need from 6.0 to make it feel like we shouldn't have just stopped at 5.3? Because 6.0 says it's going to wrap it up for real, right? So they're like, this is, you stayed for the credits. They're going to show you one more thing, and this really is going to be the end of the film. And with 6.1, we're going to begin a new story-ish. Like, what about 6.0 makes it worth extending in your mind?
Oh man. Well, first of all, we got Xenos and everything with Xenos.
Him sitting in his chair, like he's always sitting in a daggum chair. Let's go.
Yeah. You know, they honestly with 5.3, that could have been a conclusion to the whole arc with all of the Ascians and everything like that. But it does feel like there's a little bit more story to tell with what you can do with all the Ascians and everything like that. So that much is still going to be present, and I think that there is a lot of interesting things they can do with Fandaniel. I think the biggest question for me now, going back to Xenos, is what role is he going to play? Because I don't think he's going to play the obvious role that would immediately come to mind. And I don't think that they're just going to straight up play him as a sort of anime protagonist in the same way that they do. If you guys watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I always call him the Dio of Final Fantasy XIV. He's very much a very anime type villain, but I think they're going to subvert away from that here.
I wonder. I really hope that they do something substantial with him, because I thought he was a threat, and then essentially he's just become this annoyance of like, I want to kill you. I'm looking for a good fight. And that, it's like he seems so one-dimensional, and I would love to see him get a little bit of dimension. And maybe it's just that he went crazy or something like that, being infused, with the Echo, artificially and things like that. So I'm just like, I hope that we get a good payoff. I think, obviously, my personal take has always been the best villains are the ones who are motivated because they think they're the hero. It's like, okay, like, all right, I don't like doing this as much as anybody else, but it has to get done for the sake of billions of lives. It's like, okay,
right.
But like they're the ones who that they feel like they're the only ones who can make the tough call, so that everybody can be saved. And and that's, I think those are the best villains, because it's like they don't see themselves as the bad guy. They don't see themselves. They're justified in their actions, and you're just ignorant. And then where they get lost is when they lose their humanity, when they lose the those they're fighting for, and things like that. And that's where it's like, that's what I hope we get, either from Fandaniel or Xenos. But everything Fandaniel's shown us up to this point, I'm like, dude's just crazy. Like, if this is just like the expansion where it's like, I don't know. I'm really hoping that we see some powerful payoff at the end of it. Yeah.
And then you also kind of have two chaotic evils there, right?
Yeah.
So you have Xenos and Fandaniel, right? So I feel like one of them has to subvert away from that.
That, or they have to have somebody else to come into play and be like, like when we look at the connection, did you, we didn't talk about this earlier in the show, but Final Fantasy being a big franchise, where do you fall with Final Fantasy IV?
Final Fantasy IV, man, it has been some years since I played it. I've only played the DS port, but I really love Final Fantasy IV. Love the homages to it so far that they made too.
But there's also there's a lot of homages in which that some the bad guy you thought that was the bad guy turns out like, no, there's like these deeper connections. And I'm hoping that we get to see something. That we got the four fiends, there's so many things that I love. 4 was when I fell in love with Final Fantasy, because I played 1 and I was like, this game sucks. And then eventually I went back and beat it, and I was like, oh, this is, now, I really enjoy it. But the 4 is a big important aspect in my Final Fantasy lexicon. And so I love the themes and the homages, especially Shadowbringers to Endwalker, going from a Dark Knight to a Paladin, going to the moon. I'm hopeful that we'll have some of that aspects here. But we have to, if it's just like you said, two chaotic bad guys, if it's just chaos for chaos sake, it's an easy choice. It's destroy the chaos because we have to, for the sake of everybody. But I don't ultimately know.
Final Fantasy IV, and I know someone's gonna kill me for this, but Final Fantasy IV in some ways is the first Final Fantasy. I know someone's gonna. There was 3 other ones, but what I mean by that is everything that we associate with Final Fantasy now like heavily associated the way that we think of Final Fantasy in like modern context
Mm-hmm.
really started with 4 and not 1 through 3. And so 4 I almost feel like is like the most foundational Final Fantasy that there is.
I can agree with that. Now, Kefka, interesting and I guess fitting enough, says not everyone needs to be like Emmett. Xenos is a fine villain. Having this kind of villain from time to time is fun. What do you guys think about that?
I don't disagree. The only point that I was making there is that we have both Xenos and Fandaniel, who are both the same type of chaotic evil for the most part. There is not as much distinction between the two.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%, Kefka, here. That not everyone needs to be like Emmett. Not everyone needs to have like a deep. Well, obviously you call yourself Kefka on here. So I think I know who you are. I think I know who you are. You're on my stream all the time. Love you, bro. I'm pretty sure I recognize. Yeah. Anyway, but not everyone needs to be lawful evil. Not everyone needs to be like an Emmett. There's chaotic evil is fine. It's just that we have 2 chaotic evil presences. So how does that work?
What do you think about that, Chris?
I think that one could be manipulating the other, right? You are the summary of the 4 to 7 people you surround yourself with, and so if you actively surround yourself with crazy people, right? That could be that you're escaping from something, or you're working, or you're on the side, you're working towards something. And this is just a place that you're comfortable for now. So like Xenos could just be sit back, letting Fandaniel be that part of his personality. And like he's just being, and then there can be some other motive there. We haven't even talked about Hydaelyn and Zodiark. So like clearly there's some motivations in the room that are a little bit larger that like, I'm now playing through ARR for the first time. I've been playing since 2.0 as a gameplay, but Shadowbringers was the first time that I found Final Fantasy XIV story something that really captured me. And so I'm now going back through ARR effectively for the first time. And like, I'm not entirely sure I like us, like the Warrior of Light. I don't really identify as the character that is on the other side of my keyboard. And I find that really frustrating. And a lot of that comes down to the way MMOs don't allow for agency, right? Is I can't make that character into something that reflects even a part of me. They are who they are. And like, there are decisions that have to get made to get us through, all of the expansions. So like, I already know where we end up, and there's nothing I'm going to be able to do to steer that. I already know what fights we're going to fight in, where we're going to triumph, where we're going to fall. I already know all of that from a gameplay, and now I'm just filling in the gaps. And like, our just lack of motivation, and many times just lack of speech altogether, which that can just come down to they didn't want to put words in our mouth, or they didn't want to deal with the fact that we don't have a voice actor, or it can come down to a number of just like technical things outside of the game, just from like a developer standpoint. But like, I don't like that we're this silent hero for so much of it. Like we just nod and go along, and like, I have to wonder how much of that is tied to our relationship with Hydaelyn. And so like, that's like, we're all talking about Xenos and stuff, but if 6.0 is really wrapping some things up, like this whole Xenos thing better tie back to Zodiark, so that can tie back to Hydaelyn, because we can't just be like, and that's resolved. No, like, we have questions.
So in 6.1, Warrior of Light's gonna talk.
That would be mind-blowing. That would be mind. Can you imagine if we have like a voice? I picture like a Spaceballs reference there, like some joke voice. Like all along we've had, like, you pick a voice in the character creation screen, and that's not our voice.
Right.
Yeah, just
no. I always thought, like, how cool would it be, like at the end of like. At the end of like 6.0, the camera just turns to like your Warrior of Light, and then they have like all the voice actors go and record a line that you picked from your voice selection, and then he just says the line.
I would love that. That'd be nuts.
Would you cut it short, because we don't have like all the time in the world. But when I studied abroad, I lived with a woman who only spoke Spanish. And the guy that I lived with was determined to only try to speak as much English as possible. So it was just a constant bickering back and forth all summer, because they weren't speaking the same language. And I was stuck in between, not really knowing a lot of Spanish. And at the end of the summer, she got frustrated and she said to him, like they were arguing over food, and she goes, chicken, and stormed out. And so she knew English. And so like the whole summer she'd just been speaking Spanish and she knew English. And like, so to get to the end and we have this silent hero for 2.0, for 3.0, for 4.0, through 5.0, where we have like major feels like, nope, Ardbert, not worth it. Not worth it. This isn't where I'm going to show my voice. Yeah. And then we get to the end of 6.0 and it turns to the camera. And my character wears a pig suit in game. A metallic pig suit, turns to the camera, so there's no facial expression, blank eyes, and just goes, quite a ride. And then it cuts. Like, I will lose it. I will lose it. Like, just, you mean we could talk the whole time? Like,
and then you can't even continue after that. You just have to cut the credits.
They're like, well, yeah. Just, and then they're like, Final Fantasy XVII coming fall 2022. Yeah. Like, oh, okay, let's do this thing, I guess. I hope that you really enjoyed that highlight, and I hope that you check out the full podcast. Again, link is in the description. Thanks for being here, and I hope you have a fantastic day, you wonderful, beautiful individual.